All right, let's dive right in. We are going to talk about the Bible's cosmic deleted scenes. These are the high-octane, spiritual blockbusters that, believe it or not, completely shaped how we think about heaven, hell, and pretty much everything in between.
You know that feeling when you're reading the Bible and you just have to stop and think, wait, hold on a second, where did that come from? If you've ever felt that way, you are definitely not alone.
Right? The Old Testament will just drop these incredible, mysterious little details and then just move on. We get giants, angels with tons of eyes, these mysterious sons of God, but we never get the full backstory. It honestly feels like walking into a movie halfway through.
Well, what if I told you those backstories actually do exist? The answers to all these questions are hiding in plain sight in a collection of texts that were wildly popular back in the ancient world, even if most of us have never heard of them today.
And that brings us to this collection of writings with a pretty intimidating name, the Pseudepigrapha. But trust me, what it is and why it exists is absolutely fascinating.
So the name itself gives us a huge clue. Pseudepigrapha literally means falsely attributed. These texts were written by authors who put a much more famous name on their work, like Enoch or Moses. But this wasn't about forgery in the way we think of it. It was more like paying homage, and there was a very practical reason for it.
I mean, let's be honest. This slide says it all. Imagine you've got this massive, world-changing vision, but your name is Dave. In the ancient world, attaching a legendary name was how you said, hey, this work stands in the spirit and tradition of a great figure. It gave the text instant credibility in a world without publishing deals or Amazon bestseller lists.
So, you might be asking, if these texts were so important, where have they been all this time? Well, for centuries, most of them were basically lost. They were like buried treasure, just waiting to be rediscovered.
And check out this incredible journey. For centuries, they pretty much vanished from the Western world. But shout out to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church because they preserved the complete Book of 1 Enoch the whole time. Then, scholars started finding bits and pieces in dusty old monastery basements. But the real game changer was in 1947. Finding parts of these books among the Dead Sea Scrolls, right next to books like Isaiah, was proof. This wasn't some fringe literature. This was essential reading.
All right, so let's crack open some of the most influential of these books. If the Pseudepigrapha were a rock band, these next three would be the headliners, for sure. First up, we've got 1 Enoch. And honestly, the best way I can describe it is an angelic soap opera. Seriously, if you're a fan of any modern fantasy or supernatural thriller, this ancient book is going to be right up your alley. So it takes that one weird little snippet in Genesis 6 about the sons of God and blows it up into this epic story. You have these fallen angels called the Watchers who come down to Earth. They teach humanity all this forbidden knowledge, everything from making weapons to putting on makeup, and then they have giant children who literally start eating people. This is the cosmic corruption that gives us the full, gritty backstory for why the Great Flood had to happen.
And the other blockbusters? Just as wild. You've got Jubilees, which is basically the director's cut of Genesis, filling in all the gaps in timelines the original leaves out. And then there's the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, which reads like the ultimate deathbed confession, where Jacob's sons share these intense moral lessons and crazy visions of the future.
Okay, so these are cool stories, right? Ancient fan fiction. But why does any of this really matter today? Well, this right here, this is the aha moment. This is the key to understanding just how important this lost library truly is.
Think about it. Have you ever noticed that the spiritual world of the New Testament just feels ramped up compared to the Old? You've got these detailed hierarchies of angels and demons, talk of spiritual warfare, specific ideas about the afterlife, stuff that doesn't really seem to come from Genesis or Isaiah. So where did it all come from?
Well, here's the evidence. When New Testament writers like Peter and Jude talk about angels being chained in darkness, or they mention the archangel Michael fighting Satan over the body of Moses, well, go look for those stories in the Old Testament. Spoiler alert, they're not there.
That's because they're not quoting the Old Testament. They are quoting or directly referencing the world of the Pseudepigrapha. The New Testament writers were steeped in these stories. It was part of the cultural and spiritual air that they breathed every single day.
This is huge. What this means is that these ancient blockbusters, they literally built the narrative bridge between the Old and New Testaments. They provided the very vocabulary for spiritual warfare, for demonology and angelology that would become absolutely central to Christian theology.
But honestly, the importance of these texts goes even deeper than just connecting the dots. It really gets to this fundamental human need we all have, to make sense of a really chaotic world.
See, you gotta understand, the folks writing these books weren't trying to write a history textbook. Not at all. They were wrestling with the biggest questions there are. Why do bad things happen to good people? Where is God when the world seems like it's on fire? They were trying to draw a map of the spiritual reality happening right behind our own.
This wasn't some dry academic exercise. It was, like the quote says, this raw and honest cry of a people who felt like their world was falling apart and just needed some hope. They needed to believe that even when everything seems lost, there are unseen forces fighting for good in the universe.
And you know, rediscovering these texts today does something really important. It challenges our neat, tidy boxes. It reminds us that the foundations of faith aren't some sterile, simple thing. They've always been a bit edgy, a bit mysterious, and full of this raw human searching.
And it leaves us with this incredible thought that maybe, just maybe, the spiritual story we're all a part of is way bigger, way wilder, and a whole lot more cinematic than we ever give it credit for.